Firstly, just a little bit about myself, and before we sort of head into the food and school policy. My background is in dietetics, and I have been working with the Health Promotion Agency and now the Public Health Agency for about about 8 or 9 years now. So I've been really at the start of our food and school journey, and until really last year was the food and schools coordinator, but Judith has greatly and kindly taken on that role. But my responsibility within the Public Health Agency is still to support the food and school in a policy way, and also I pick up some pieces of work around Fitter Future, which is our obesity strategy as well. Judith's going to focus a bit more on the end of the talk around the resources that are available and some of the new things that we're doing. But over the number of years you would have received through schools many of our resources around the food and school policy and the agenda. And indeed, I think Maria had mentioned at the end of her talk our Choose to Live Better website, so I'm not sure how many people have been on that website, but that's the website that supports a Fitter Future for All, the obesity strategy. So I mention it because there's a whole lot of recipes on it, and there's going to be about another 60 more recipes coming on board in the next year. So if you ever are looking at Google, one of the number one sort of things on Google when they're talking about healthy eating is recipes. So we're trying to sort of increase that section of our website. So that's just for your information. I'm also foremost a parent of 2 children, one just about to leave primary school and one who's just started year 8. And is experiencing his first time at home economics, and I'm delighted that his HE teacher isn't in the room because I'm just not quite sure what I'd get back around his food skills and different things there. So I'm starting to see what's coming home from the school, and much to his annoyance keep asking lots of questions about what he's doing as well. I also see a few faces out here. I see Mary sitting there and a couple of others around. We have been running as part of the agency the Diploma in Nutrition course for several years, and we've just recently had our last cohort of teachers, which I'm glad to see there are a few here, and that's the Diploma in Nutrition. It runs over several months, and it's there for teachers who are teaching HE but are coming from a different background, so I'm delighted to see a few faces from there. Food and school policy. Hopefully, if I ask the question who has heard of the food and school policy, everybody's hand should go up. It's high up in the agenda at the moment. Last week we had our food and school conference, and I know there are a few people here that were there, so apologies if a bit of this talk you've heard before, but repetition isn't always a bad thing. But this slide really highlights how long it takes to get a policy into place. We started back in 2008 with the first sort of draft food and school policy, and you can see there the process, and it only came out last September time. So on average it takes about 4 or 5 years for a policy to come into place, and this is one of the most recent policies from the Department of Education, and it's also a joint policy with Health because the two obviously have a hand in hand here. So it's high up in the agenda of the Minister, and it should be really in your senior management teams fairly high up in their agenda at the moment, and you'll obviously see why as we go through. That's the overall aim. I'm not going to really read it. It looks at a wide aspect of the policy. You'll see the word whole school approach mentioned throughout the policy, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that actually means. It's about the cooking skills, it's about the knowledge, and it's also about that sort of food skills that we have as part, and HE is very clearly part of this process. It also looks at early years. There you can see the number of children that are coming through our school gates and for the length of time that they're here. So school as a setting from a health perspective is very important because it's our chance to sort of engage with that group and sort of try and hope and change habits for future life. Okay, so what does the policy actually mean? This is what it looks like if anyone hasn't actually seen a copy of it. This is the full winded version. There is a really good, easy to read parents guide, which I probably would recommend looking at first and then delving into this if you need more information. But that would have been sent out in September time to your principals in your school, and it's available through the website. And the Minister was quite keen for all schools to engage with your parents and to make them aware of the policy and what that will mean for their children in your school. But what it really means for you as a school is that by September time, as in the start of the next academic year, all schools, grant-aided schools, must have a food and school policy in place. So there's no ifs and buts, must have. And obviously as part of inspections, which unfortunately many of you in this room may have been involved in or will be involved in, I imagine it'll be one of the things that will be asked. We've had standards in school food since 2007, so we're about nearly 8 years into that. So that should be well embedded. I do think that maybe things have slipped a little bit with losing out on our nutritional inspectorates, and this policy maybe gives us a bit of a chance to raise it back up the agenda and maybe just put it into the viewpoint of those within school. Fresh drinking water should be available, and I was just listening to Emma's talk there around hydration, so that was quite apt around some of the resources that BNF have around that. And then this is the bit that you'll be familiar with. We've got home economics there as part of the curriculum, but also food in relation to healthy eating needs to be embedded right through the school from foundation up to Key Stage 4. And for the primary schools, it is around that PDMU element, but it will be cross-curricular, so there will be elements within science and maths and languages and various other aspects of the curriculum. I'm going to ask for a show of hands here. Can I ask you just to raise your hand if your school has a policy in place or is thinking about, or is in the process of putting a policy in place? Okay. So I'd say it's probably just over half of here that have a policy or in the process. Can I also ask you just to raise your hands, as yourselves as HE teachers are very key to this. You're not necessarily the person who's always going to be responsible for it, but I and I'm sure Glenys will do believe that your voice is very key. Can I ask you to put your hands up if you're engaged as part of your school, as part of the policy? Yeah. So just as fewer than that there. It is, I think, the responsibility of the senior management team within the school, because unless you have that there, nothing ever really sort of cascades down. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. You'll be familiar, and you might use this skill within your own classroom, the sort of 5 W's and H's, like the who, what, where, why and when. I'm going to use that as a basis around how to develop a whole school policy, because you may be, if you haven't been asked at the moment, might be the point of contact within your school for your senior management team to come to ask that question. How do we do this? What do we need to be looking at? What does this actually mean? So I thought it was useful to spend a bit of time here just saying, look, if you do come across this here, you don't have to pluck it from thin air. We've got some good resources that will help you, and hopefully throughout this talk I'll give you a little bit of guidance around what maybe areas you need to look at. First is why. Why do we need to do this? Why bother? Why are we looking from this here? And I mean, I think, I'm talking to the converted here. Nutrition is very much central to health. It's important from the womb upwards, and if you're at the meeting conference last week, one of our colleagues, Michelle McKinley from Queen's, made that quite clear that what's happening is in the womb at the moment, and sort of even the pregnancy aspect really does impact on future health here, and early years is key, and that includes the school setting here as well. So we want to influence what children eat now and also what they will do in the future. We know the obesity difficulties we have here in Northern Ireland. About, if you're starting P1, about 1 in 4 children in your class at the moment, if you're a P1 teacher, will be overweight or obese. That doesn't get any better as you go up through school. Indeed, increases when you get to year 8. You'll have more children who are overweight in year 8 than they are in P1. And if you come to school as an overweight or obese child, you often will leave school as an overweight and obese child. So, school has a great part to play here around maybe trying to change and do that even actually before they get to school really as well. So why do you want to have a food and school policy? It's a public statement about what your school is all about. It's a good ethos around how you look to make a positive contribution to both staff and pupils. This is just not about pupils as well. It's around that whole school approach. It's very clear that schools must do this. This is legislation now. That's why the policy is in place. The Minister's made it very clear that now all schools have to have this in place. We mentioned before it has to be in place by September, so this is a good time now to really start, if you haven't got a policy in place, thinking, okay, let's spend this summer term gathering our information, starting to think about what that policy means in order for that new school year to really start communicating out to everybody who's coming through your doors again what we're doing about this. So it's good and timely now to have a look at this. So what is the policy? I mean, many of you will be involved in policy writing throughout your school in a number of different levels, but it is around, it's an evolving document. It's not one piece of paper or a policy that gets done, put on a shelf and doesn't get looked at again, because that's no good for anybody, and certainly not within the school. It will be shared, it will be involving, it will change from year to year, it will depend on your priority within your school, but what it will do is express that sort of common theme within your school, and we'll try and put everything together into one place and have a coherent approach. So it's not just maybe the curriculum sits here, the canteen sits here, the PE department sit here and do something different. It's about pulling all of those agendas together into one place and making it really clear what your school wants to achieve for your staff and for your pupils. So who needs to be involved? And this will depend. I mean, many of you will have good examples of what works well in your own schools. Many schools have school councils already up and running. They're good venues, pupil voice is already on there. So sometimes they take a cohort of that and maybe add a little bit into that. Other schools, because it's such an issue at the moment, and the fact is that you need to do it, they're pulling it in separate groups, and they're called SNI groups, School Nutrition Action Groups, and they work really well, and particularly maybe as a sort of task end group, they can be quite good to sort of focus on one particular area. I put there needs leadership from senior management. I think that's key, and I can imagine if I ask out round this room, that will be the answer I get. It's not the responsibility of the home economics teacher to do this policy. You will have a voice, you'll be able to guide and direct, but it needs to be coming from top level, and that's why we had the conference last week, was really to try and engage with that senior management team around that there. So who needs to be involved? It will depend on your school. We talk about whole school approach. This is what they mean. They want to have a pupil voice, they want a parent voice, they definitely need a board or governor voice, particularly if you're a voluntary or a grammar or integrated school. The responsibility for food lies with the board of governors as well as the principal in the school. You'll want to engage with your school catering service. You can't sort of make changes here without them. And if you have a school nurse as well, that's great. So where to start? If you haven't got a policy in place and you're starting from square one, the first thing I'd say is that you really need to find out what the problems are within your own school. What are the issues? What do you need to look at? And I've just listed a few things there that might be worth considering as part of that. So food and drink provision, what's being served in your school? Does it comply? If not, why not? And what do you need to do to make sure that it does comply? That includes vending machines, includes the tuck shops, includes the after schools. And I think in a way that's why the senior management needs to be really involved in here, because sometimes we do hear the voice coming from catering and coming from yourselves to say that sometimes what happens in the school isn't always complying with what should be happening. Dining experience, what's it like? Do you eat in your own canteen in school? Do the teachers eat there? Would they eat there? If not, why not? What's the pupils' views on that? All your extracurricular activities, advertising, sponsorship, sports days, who are you using for your sponsorship? And then the pastoral care side around sort of uptake of free school meals. So there's lots and lots of areas that need to look at. Who do you need to talk to? I mean, this is what they mean by a whole school approach, and this is whose voices need to be heard in this process for this policy to have any great standing within the school. Part of the sort of school food agenda, we did go out in 2008. I've just recently completed another survey asking pupils and parents and teachers and board of governors their views on school food and their attitudes and perceptions to school food. So we've had over 500 teaching staff, over 1,100 parents replied, and we've had nearly over 2,200 pupils reply to these questionnaires. So I'm going to give you a bit of a flavour of what they're saying, because what this is saying is what you're going to hear in your own school. So from a pupil perspective, what they really want to know is they don't want to queue for their dinner. They want to get into the canteen and be out as quick as possible to do all the other things that they want to do at break time. So queuing is a big issue. Cost is an issue for them. They want value for money. They want to make sure there's enough choice available there in the school canteen. They want to also be able to eat with other people who aren't necessarily going into the canteen, so they want to eat with their friends and do things like that. From a teacher's perspective, nearly all, I think 95% of teachers, so nearly all teachers really support the standards for school food. They see this as a good thing. But they think that the parent support isn't there. About half of them think that parents really, parent support is lacking around this. But yet, if you ask the parents, nearly, I think it was something like 9 out of 10 parents are really supportive of what goes on in food in schools, in your schools. So there's a bit of disparity here between the teaching staff feeling they're not getting the support and the parents saying we really want to support you. And I think when we look at that next level down, it's all about communication. It's about that communication between the school and the parent and the pupil, and really maybe where it isn't as good as what it could possibly be. Once you've gathered your information, you need to collate that all together, and you need to decide, okay, what's your priority here as a school? You could have a whole range of things that you need to look at, and this has to be a realistic document. So you want to start thinking, what's your main aims here, and what is your targets, and how are you going to actually measure this policy? Because a policy now isn't just about just putting it into place. It has to be evaluated, it has to be monitored, and has to be updated as well. So you start to draft the policy. you keep it tight, you keep it realistic, you realise that this is all not going to happen over one school year. It might be a 3-year, 5-year plan. That's the way they work in health and education around things like that, and you make sure that you know who's responsible for doing what. And as part of this here, I put up just a few things that need to be considered. So we've mentioned some of those around. It's about the curriculum here. Obviously HE is very dedicated and it has a main role here, but what about all those other subject areas? We've got languages, we've got maths, ICT, and Glynis had touched on some of those. There's cross-links here, art and design in particular, for maybe making that dining room a bit of a nicer place to go into. So there are opportunities to bring the food and healthy eating aspect into a wide range of curriculum, and that's really what this policy is all around, and as well as about making sure the food that is served in your school meets the standards. What is up to the school and it's discretionary is what food is brought into your school, so that's the lunch boxes and advertising and the sponsorships. So the standards just sort of sit over food that's served and sold in school, but it's up to the school to have that decision around what other policies they want to bring into around sort of the break time and the lunch box as well. And also I've just added in there commitment for staff training. This all doesn't happen overnight, and staff need to be allowed the time to develop this and to sort of engage there. So we've got consult, modify, share, implement, review. That's the whole core thing there. Particularly in primary schools are quite good at communicating with parents. They usually have a little newsletter that goes out every week, and you hear a lot. It's a smaller environment, so you hear a lot of what's going on in the school. Once they go into that post-primary school, I think that the parent becomes a slightly isolated person as part of what goes on. But yet the high school usually has every parent's email address, and I know in the school that my child goes to, I'm frequently getting sent emails around various aspects of school life, and I have to say I've never once had an email around this policy or developing of a policy or anything around. So you do need to start, and sharing and consulting is one of the big things of what's going to make a policy successful, because if everybody feels part of that policy, then they will go with you and they'll bring it along and do that as well. So just to say, you don't have to start making this all up from scratch. This here, I've just brought a copy of it, was sent out to all the schools maybe back in 2008, 2009. So there's at least 2 or 3 copies in your school. If you don't have a copy, speak to Judith and I with some spare copies, we can certainly send them out to you. But it goes through the whole school day. So it looks from breakfast through to break, to dining room experience, water in schools, to meat vending, different things in there. But in particular, I'm just going to highlight you to one of this, and it's all downloadable, so if you don't have a copy, you can just go online and see this. But one of the first booklets that we have is establishing a whole school food policy, and this is a very simple, forward, step-by-step guide. So if you are tasked to have a look at this, or your school principal says, look, what do I need to do? Give me a bit of guidance, because they may well do that there. Pull this out and have a look at it, because that will start you on the right path. It has how to go about it, how to sort of consult on different things. It also has a healthy eating checklist, an audit tool there already. So if you're wanting to know, like, what are your issues in here, take and lift the audit tool out and use it in your school, and then start to find out what some of the problems are within it. And on the back page as well, near the back, we have an actual sample of what a whole school food policy means. It doesn't have to be pages and pages and reams of information. You'll have ways of setting out your policy in your own school, and usually there's a bit of ethos at the front, but it is simple aims and objectives and different things like that. So it's not a complicated document, but what is important is the process that sits behind that. If that process is right, the policy will be right as well. So you don't, if your principal comes asking, or any one of the part of the senior management team, please gear them towards this resource, because that will really keep them right in relation to that. Okay, and I'm just going to actually change into the younger version of me now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to quickly follow on from Jennifer. My title is Resources to Support Schools to Implement a Whole School Food Policy. So what is out there, but recognising that it won't always be yourselves or the Home Economics Department that will be responsible for the policy, but there are resources available, not just for the policy, but will hopefully help just your day-to-day food and schools agenda within the department. So Jennifer's already touched on this. sorry to state the obvious, but there is of course the policy document itself. That's the perfect place to start. This was issued to all schools following the launch last September, but it is an electronic version and it's available to download as a PDF from the Department of Education website, and everything is under a food and school section in there. There's also, on the right is the policy Easy Read. So this was developed as a colourful option, and it's probably a tenth of the size of the main document. But this could be really useful if you just simply want to promote or raise awareness or explain what the policy is to parents or the wider school community. Jennifer's already touched on the essential guide. The other two documents there are the nutritional standards. So everything has this uniform green colour. We've got nutritional standards for school lunches and nutritional standards for other food and drinks in schools. So the one on the right may be more relevant to your area. But these two documents explain all of the standards and give practical advice on how to implement them. Other resources that are more ongoing and topical, we've got Bite, which is our Food and Schools magazine. This is developed by the 5 education and library boards with the Department of Education and just gives up-to-date information and examples of what's going on across Northern Ireland. It's a good promotional material, and again, if you wanted to use that to just be raising awareness of what's going on in schools, it's available to download again from the Department of Education website, and that could be included on your own school websites or circulated to the wider school community. The latest issue, which has our minister on the front, that was issued last week, and the department puts that out, I think, through the info accounts to schools, so hopefully that's coming down to yourselves from those accounts. But if you haven't seen it, say it is available on our website. On the right here, hopefully you will have seen this. This is the NISCA calendar of events. That's the Northern Ireland School Caterers Association. And following the launch of the policy in September, NISCA agreed to help to support that policy with promotional events this year. If you look through the calendar, they wanted a theme each month, and as it's the first year, they didn't want to go overboard with things they couldn't sustain. So there are events in there that are tried and tested successful events. So we've still got our Christmas lunch on in December and our Easter and things like that. But what they were trying to do is create themes with more of this whole school approach to food and trying to establish that link with the curriculum. So hopefully you've been hearing about these things. In January we supported Farmhouse Breakfast Week. Last month we called it National Heart Month in case it all went wrong and we could always rely on Valentine's Day, but we held a very successful event with the British Heart Foundation to support their campaign. They called it Ramp Up the Red as a fundraising event. It would be interesting if I could chat to some of you at the end to see if that was supported, if we heard enough about that. And we just had our International School Meals Day last week. So as of the theme that's going through this is this whole school approach, and as Glynis really excellently described about these cross-curriculum links and whole school approach, and that's really what we're trying to achieve. Now, I'll just jump in. The NISCA have said they were using this year as a trial. And what we have been hearing from schools, which is always a given, that you need a lot of forward planning, you need a lot of advance notice. So NISCA are going to develop the 2014-15 calendar by May or June this year and have that out to schools. So hopefully you can plan and build those themes into your curriculum plans for next year. And then there's the curriculum resources. The ones I've talked about so far have really been put together by the department, but we've got so many other agencies out there, including BNF obviously and LMC here today. And although it's extremely positive that there's so many resources out there around food and based on different aspects of food and geared towards the different key stages, we understand that it could be a little overwhelming or daunting sometimes to just know exactly where to go for that information or what's the most relevant. So for this reason, the Food and Schools Forum, which is made up by all of these partners, their logos at the bottom of the slide, we've been working very closely with C2K over the last 6 months to try and develop one resource or one access point to make it easier to get to all of the resources in one place. And this is our new Food at My School room. I presume everybody is up to speed with My School. It took me a wee while to get to grips with it, but it's the new intranet system in all schools in Northern Ireland that replaced Learning NI. And the Food and Skills Forum are trying to use these 3 different facilities within my school. So first of all is Aquila, the online library. So the different organisations within the forum have been uploading their resources into the Northern Ireland Curriculum Library on there. So if you are aware of the name of the resource that you want to find, hopefully you can do that very quickly and simply with a keyword search within that library. We've also been sticking our toe in the water with Illuminate. We tried our first live video conferencing session in January around Farmhouse Breakfast Week. So we worked with NELB TV Studio and C2K, and they hosted a video conference with Ruth Balmer, a dietitian from the Food Standards Agency. We aimed that at Key Stage 3 home economics, so hopefully there's some folk in the room that used that. But within that session we had 25 schools link in from across Northern Ireland, and Ruth provided information and was able to answer questions for all of those schools in a 30-minute session. So we're really pleased with how it went, and we see there's so much potential to be using this. You know, the forum and myself and many other outside agencies are inundated with requests to come into schools to do talks or presentations or workshops, and just because of capacity it's not possible. So we're really excited at the fact Illuminate we can access schools all across Northern Ireland in one session and be able to answer questions. And for those that didn't or weren't able to link into that session on breakfast, it was recorded and that's now gone into our Food at My School room. So our Food at My School room sits within Fronter, and this is a collaborative area, or it's known as a virtual learning environment, or VLE. Basically an area where teachers and schools can collaborate, so they can communicate and engage with each other to create a community of practice. So that's what C2K, that's all their buzzwords. Very easy to access our Food at My School room. If you are familiar with the system, the rooms, sometimes you have to be registered as a member. So you could be using My School, but you still have to become a member of a certain room, and that's the case for this. But it is very easy to access. So I might even, if everyone's happy, I could use your email addresses from today's registration and upload it that way, but we can discuss that. But if you would like to become a member, all you have to do is email this address here and request that, and I can add you in. But once you are a member, you simply go into your My School through the desktop, or if you're accessing it from home, go to c2kschools.net. You have what's called a launch pad on the right. If you look for the Fronter icon, and then once you are a member, the Food at My School logo should be in your room on your front page. So you just click into that and it comes to our homepage, which we're really pleased with. We had a professional design company help with all the graphics and everything, so it's colourful and easy to use. I've simplified, hopefully, a list here of everything that you can access within the room. So it covers everything that I've briefly mentioned and much, much more. 2 things I'll just pull out is the media clips and example case studies. We've created a very good partnership with NELB TV, and they've been supporting with these Illuminate sessions. We have a welcome film from the Minister, and we've just done a case study. Now, it was in a primary school, but it was an example of a whole school approach to food, and there's lots, if you watch the film, there's lots of aspects that could be replicated in a post-primary. But we want to continue that, and we really want to use these case studies and link it in with this collaboration. So using best practice and hearing from schools, particularly around the policy, was there an aspect of it? Emma brought up about water. Is anybody doing something great around water, or anything to do with the policy of food in schools? We would love to showcase that and show it to other schools and get comments. And with the collaboration, there's opportunity through discussion forums and voting tools to hear from you. And really, I just want to finish by saying I hope you all access it. I hope you all find it useful. We will be updating that with as much information as we feel that we can provide and that you need, but it's very much a user-led resource. So I hope you can go on and leave comments and get in touch with me to let me know, what would be useful, what you'd want to use that room for. Thank you.